Black secretary rented a fake boyfriend for $20, unaware he was a CEO who'd change her life forever. The notification on my phone made my stomach twist into knots. Another company charity gala. Another evening where I'd stand awkwardly by the punch bowl while my coworkers exchanged knowing glances about Maya Thompson, the perpetually single secretary who couldn't even land a date to save her career. I stared at the elegant invitation on my desk, its gold lettering mocking me. Henderson and Associates Annual Charity Gala Cocktail Attire Required. Required. Just like bringing a +1 seemed to be an unspoken requirement if you wanted to be taken seriously in this glass tower of corporate drama. Maya, you coming to the gala this weekend? Jessica from accounting appeared at my cubicle, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against my desk partition. Her smile was sweet, but her eyes held that familiar glint of curiosity mixed with pity. Of course, I replied, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. Wouldn't miss it. Great! Can't wait to meet your date. She paused, tilting her head. You are bringing someone, right? I mean, after what happened last year when you came alone and spent the whole night reorganizing the silent auction table. Heat crept up my neck. Last year's gala had been a disaster. While everyone else networked and laughed over expensive wine, I'd literally hidden behind the charity displays, pretending to be busy. The senior partners had walked right past me like I was invisible furniture. Actually, yes. I'm bringing Daniel, I said, the lie tumbling out before I could stop it. Jessica's eyebrows shot up. Daniel? How exciting! Where did you meet him? My mind went blank. Through mutual friends. He's in business. Well, I can't wait to meet this mysterious Daniel. She winked and strutted away in her designer heels, leaving me staring at my computer screen in horror. What had I just done? The rest of the week passed in a blur of panic. I couldn't show up alone again. Not when I just bragged about bringing a date. Not when I was already fighting tooth and nail for the assistant manager position that had been under consideration for 8 months. The partners needed to see me as more than just Maya the secretary who organized their files and brought them coffee. That's how I found myself on Friday night, scrolled through rentadate.com with my credit card in my hand and my dignity somewhere on the floor. $20 for a 4-hour companionship package. It was cheaper than the dress I'd bought for the gala, and definitely cheaper than the therapy I'd need if I had to endure another night of workplace humiliation. The app's interface was surprisingly professional. No shady photos or obvious red flags. Just clean profiles of men offering to be wedding dates, corporate event companions, or social escorts. Nothing inappropriate, just companionship. I scrolled through dozens of faces until one caught my attention. Daniel Martinez, age 32, professional companion for corporate events and social gatherings. Experienced in business conversation and formal etiquette. Excellent references. His photos showed a man with kind eyes and a confident smile. Not devastatingly handsome, but attractive in an approachable way. Someone who looked like he belonged in a boardroom but wouldn't make me feel completely outclassed. Perfect. I clicked book now, before I could chicken out, typing in my request. Need a date for corporate charity gala. Saturday 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Business attire required. Please be punctual and professional. His response came within an hour. Looking forward to it, Maya. I'll pick you up at 6:30 p.m. sharp. Don't worry, we'll make sure you have a great evening. Saturday arrived with the speed of a freight train. I spent 3 hours getting ready, changing outfits 4 times before settling on a sleek black dress that made me feel powerful and sophisticated. My natural hair was styled in elegant curls, and I'd even splurged on professional makeup. If I was going to fake having a love life, I was going to look amazing doing it. At exactly 6:30 p.m., my doorbell rang. I grabbed my clutch, took a deep breath, and opened the door. The man standing on my doorstep was not what I expected. Daniel Martinez was tall, probably 6'2", with broad shoulders that filled out his perfectly tailored black suit. His dark hair was styled immaculately, and when he smiled, it transformed his entire face. But it wasn't his looks that caught me off guard. It was his presence. The way he carried himself with quiet confidence, like he was used to commanding attention without having to demand it. "Maya?" His voice was warm but authoritative. "You look absolutely stunning." "Thank you," I managed, suddenly feeling like I was the one who should be paying him more than $20. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He offered his arm with old-fashioned charm. "Shall we? I have a car waiting." A car waiting. Not an Uber or a taxi, but a sleek black sedan with a driver who nodded respectfully as we approached. Daniel opened the door for me, and I slid into leather seats that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "So," I said as we pulled away from my modest apartment complex, "tell me about yourself. What do you do when you're not, well, doing this?" Something flickered across his face so quickly I almost missed it. "I work in business development. Lots of corporate meetings, investor relations, that sort of thing." He turned to me with that charming smile. "What about you? Besides looking incredible at charity galas, of course." I laughed despite my nerves. "I'm a secretary at Henderson and Associates. It's not glamorous, but I'm hoping to move up soon. There's an assistant manager position I've been eyeing." "Henderson and Associates," he repeated thoughtfully. "The financial consulting firm downtown?" "That's the one." "Do you know it?" "I've heard of it," he said carefully. "Good reputation. What kind of work do you do there?" As we drove through the city lights, I found myself relaxing. Daniel was easy to talk to, asking intelligent questions about my work and listening to my answers like they actually mattered. He didn't seem like he was just going through the motions of a paid date. There was something genuine about his interest, something that made me forget this was all pretend. When we arrived at the Grand Ballroom Hotel, Daniel helped me out of the car with practiced ease. As we walked toward the entrance, I caught glimpses of my coworkers arriving with their real dates, real relationships, real lives that extended beyond the office walls. "Nervous?" Daniel asked quietly, placing his hand gently on the small of my back. "Terrified," I admitted. "Don't be. You belong here just as much as anyone else." The certainty in his voice made me believe him, if only for a moment. We stepped into the ballroom, and I felt the familiar weight of curious stares. But this time was different. This time, I had Daniel beside me, his presence like a shield against the whispered conversations and pitying glances I'd grown accustomed to. "Maya!" Jessica appeared almost immediately, her eyes wide as she took in my companion. "And you must be Daniel." "Guilty as charged," he said smoothly, extending his hand. "You must be Jessica. Maya's told me so much about you." I hadn't mentioned Jessica at all, but somehow Daniel made it sound completely natural. As Jessica chatted animatedly, I watched him work his magic. He asked about her work, complimented her dress, and made her feel like the most interesting person in the room. Within minutes, she was practically glowing. "He's perfect," she whispered to me when Daniel stepped away to get us drinks. "Where have you been hiding him?" "It's complicated," I said, which was certainly true. As the evening progressed, I watched Daniel navigate the corporate crowd with surprising skill. He knew exactly how to shake hands with the senior partners, when to laugh at their jokes, and how to steer conversations toward topics that made me look good. When Mr. Henderson himself approached our table, Daniel somehow managed to mention my recent work on the quarterly reports and my innovative ideas for streamlining client communications. "Maya is quite an asset to your company," Daniel told Mr. Henderson with the kind of confident authority that made people listen. "I hope you're recognizing her potential." Mr. Henderson looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "Yes, well, Maya has always been reliable." "Reliable and brilliant," Daniel corrected smoothly. "A rare combination." As Mr. Henderson walked away, I stared at Daniel in amazement. "How did you do that?" "Do what?" "Make him actually see me. In 3 years of working there, he's never looked at me the way he just did." Daniel's expression grew serious. "Maybe he's just never had anyone point out what was right in front of him." The way he said it, the way he looked at me when he said it, made my heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with pretending. For a dangerous moment, I forgot this was all an act. I forgot about the $20 and the rental agreement, and the fact that Monday morning would bring us back to reality. As the band began playing and couples moved onto the dance floor, Daniel stood and offered his hand. "Would you like to dance, Maya?" I looked around the ballroom at my coworkers dancing with their real boyfriends and husbands, at the life I was pretending to have, at the man who was making it all seem possible. "Yes," I said, taking his hand. "I'd like that very much." And as we moved on to the dance floor together, I realized that somewhere between the car ride and Mr. Henderson's surprised recognition, I'd stopped thinking of Daniel as my fake boyfriend. The problem was, I had no idea what to call him instead. 2 hours into the gala, the champagne had gone to my head, and the suffocating small talk was making my chest tight. Corporate events always had this effect on me, all those forced smiles and strategic conversations where every word was calculated for maximum networking benefit. I needed air. "I'm going to step outside for a moment," I whispered to Daniel, who was currently charming Mrs. Patterson from HR with what appeared to be genuine interest in her cat rescue stories. "I'll come with you," he said immediately, excusing us both with the kind of smooth politeness that came naturally to him. The hotel's balcony overlooked the city skyline, and the cool night air was a blessed relief from the ballroom's oppressive atmosphere. I gripped the marble railing and took deep breaths, trying to calm my racing heart. "You okay?" Daniel asked, joining me at the railing. He'd loosened his tie slightly, and somehow that small imperfection made him seem more human, more real. "Just needed some space. These events make me claustrophobic." I laughed bitterly. Which is ironic, considering I paid $20 to not be alone at one. Daniel was quiet for a moment, studying the city lights below us. "You know, you don't give yourself enough credit. In there, you held your own with people who should be recognizing your worth every day. Should be, but don't." The champagne was definitely talking now, loosening the careful filter I usually kept on my thoughts. "Do you want to know something funny? I probably know more about Henderson and Associates' actual business than half the partners in that room. How's that?" I should have stopped there. Should have made some light comment about filing systems and changed the subject. But there was something about Daniel's presence, the way he listened without judgment, that made me want to keep talking. "I handle all the vendor payments. Every invoice, every contract, every financial document crosses my desk before it goes to accounting." I turned to face him, and his dark eyes were completely focused on me. "And lately, things haven't been adding up." "What kind of things?" The question was casual, but I noticed he'd shifted slightly, his body language more alert. Like he was really listening now, not just being polite. "Payments to companies I can't find any record of. Vendor contracts for services that don't seem to exist. We paid $3 million last quarter to something called Meridian Solutions for consulting services, but I can't find a single report, meeting note, or deliverable." I shook my head. When I asked my supervisor about it, she told me to focus on my own responsibilities. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. $3 million for consulting services with no deliverables. That's just one example. There are others. Smaller amounts, but they add up. I started keeping a list. I pulled out my phone and showed him a notes file. "Look at this: Pacific Financial Advisory, Summit Strategic Group, Apex Business Solutions. I've Googled every one of these companies. Half of them don't seem to exist beyond a basic website, and the other half have addresses that lead to empty office buildings." Daniel was very still now, studying my phone screen with an intensity that made me suddenly self-conscious. "Maya, have you shown this to anyone else?" I tried. "I scheduled a meeting with Mr. Carter in accounting, but he canceled twice and then told me the information was above my clearance level. When I persisted, my supervisor, Linda, pulled me aside and suggested I might be happier in a different position if I couldn't stick to my assigned duties. She threatened your job. Not in so many words, but the message was clear. Drop it, or find yourself dropped." I put my phone away, suddenly feeling foolish. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm telling you all this. It's not exactly gala conversation. Daniel moved closer, his voice dropping to something just above a whisper. Don't apologize. What you're describing, it's serious. Very serious. I know it looks bad, but what can I do? I'm just a secretary. Who's going to listen to me? Something flickered across Daniel's face, then an expression I couldn't quite read. Anger, maybe, or determination. But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. You'd be surprised who might listen, he said quietly. Before I could ask what he meant, the balcony doors opened and Jessica appeared, slightly breathless. There you are! They're about to announce the charity auction winners, and Mr. Henderson was asking about you, Maya. He wants to introduce you to some potential clients. My heart jumped. Mr. Henderson wanted to introduce me to clients? That never happened to secretaries. Go, Daniel said, his charming smile sliding back into place like a mask. This is your moment. As we walked back into the ballroom, Daniel placed his hand on my back again, but this time the gesture felt different. Protective, almost possessive. And when Mr. Henderson approached us with two distinguished-looking men in expensive suits, Daniel stepped slightly forward. Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Maya Thompson, one of our most valuable team members, Mr. Henderson said, and I nearly choked on my champagne. Valuable team member? Maya has an exceptional eye for detail and a deep understanding of our operational processes, Daniel added smoothly, and somehow made it sound like he'd known me for years instead of hours. As I shook hands with the potential clients, answering their questions about Henderson and Associates' efficiency and attention to detail, I caught Daniel watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Pride, definitely. But there was something else there. Something that looked almost like recognition. Would you like to dance? He asked when the clients moved on to schmooze other partners. I'd love to. As he led me onto the dance floor, I found myself studying his profile. There were so many questions I wanted to ask, but somehow, swaying in his arms to the soft jazz music, they didn't seem important anymore. What mattered was that for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I belonged here. Like I was worth $20 and a whole lot more. Monday morning hit me like a sledgehammer wrapped in corporate policy. I arrived at Henderson and Associates with Saturday night still glowing in my memory. The way Daniel had looked at me during our last dance. The gentle kiss on my cheek when he dropped me off. The promise to see me soon. That had sounded like so much more than polite courtesy. But the office was buzzing with an energy I'd never felt before. Clusters of employees huddled by the coffee machine, their voices dropping to urgent whispers whenever someone walked by. Even Linda, my perpetually calm supervisor, looked frazzled as she hurried past my desk without her usual morning critique of my outfit. Maya, did you hear? Jessica practically sprinted to my cubicle, her eyes wide with excitement and terror. The shareholder is here. The big one. My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. What shareholder? The one who owns 40% of the company. Nobody's seen him in 2 years. But apparently he flew in over the weekend for some kind of emergency meeting. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. They're saying heads are going to roll. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the office's aggressive air conditioning. What kind of emergency meeting? Financial audit. Full company review. They've got lawyers and accountants swarming the executive floor like ants. Jessica's face was pale. My friend in HR says they've been going through files all weekend. Something about irregularities in vendor payments. The blood drained from my face so fast I thought I might faint. Vendor payments. The exact same issues I'd confided to Daniel on Saturday night. I have to get back to work, I mumbled, but Jessica was already moving on to spread the gossip to her next victim. I spent the morning in a daze, mechanically filing reports and answering phones while my mind raced. Was this connected to what I told Daniel? It couldn't be. He was just a rental boyfriend, a stranger I'd paid $20 to pretend to care about me. There was no way he could have. All staff meeting in the main conference room. 5 minutes. The announcement crackled through the intercom, and my stomach dropped to my shoes. In 3 years at Henderson and Associates, we'd never had an all-staff meeting. Ever. The conference room was packed, every chair filled and people standing along the walls. The usual chatter was replaced by nervous silence as employees exchanged worried glances. At the front of the room, Mr. Henderson stood with 3 men in expensive suits I didn't recognize. And then the 4th man stepped into view. My world tilted on its axis. Daniel. My $20 fake boyfriend Daniel was standing in the CEO's conference room, surrounded by lawyers and accountants, looking like he owned the place. Because apparently he did. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Henderson began, his voice strained. "I'd like to introduce Daniel Castellanos, principal shareholder and founding investor of Henderson and Associates." The room erupted in whispers, but I couldn't hear anything over the roaring in my ears. Daniel Castellanos. Not Martinez. Not a rental boyfriend. Not someone who worked in business development. He was the company owner. The man who could fire every person in this room with a phone call. Daniel's eyes swept the crowd, and when they found mine, I saw something flicker across his face. Recognition. Concern. Maybe even apology. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. I'd told him everything. Every suspicion, every irregularity, every detail about the financial problems I'd discovered. I'd handed him ammunition against my own colleagues, my own company, and I'd done it while thinking he was just some guy I'd hired to make me look less pathetic. "We're implementing immediate changes to ensure the financial integrity of this organization," Daniel continued, his voice carrying the authority I'd glimpsed on Saturday night but hadn't understood. "Over the next week, we'll be conducting a comprehensive review of all vendor relationships and payment processes." My supervisor Linda shot me a look from across the room that could have frozen lava. She knew. Somehow, she knew this was connected to the questions I'd been asking. "This review will be thorough but fair," Daniel added, and his eyes met mine again. "We're committed to protecting the jobs of honest, hard-working employees while addressing any irregularities we may find." The meeting ended with nervous murmurs and sideways glances. As people filed out, I tried to blend into the crowd, to escape before Daniel could approach me. But his voice stopped me cold. "Maya, could I see you in my office, please?" Every head in the room turned to stare at me. Jessica's mouth hung open. Linda looked like she was planning my funeral. And I felt like I was walking to my execution as I followed Daniel down the hall to an office I'd walked past 1,000 times but never entered. The door closed behind us with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot. "We need to talk," he said, and his voice held none of the warmth from Saturday night. This was Daniel Castellanos the investor, not Daniel Martinez the fake boyfriend. "I can explain," I started, but he held up a hand. "You don't need to explain anything. I need to explain everything." He moved to the window, looking out at the city skyline we'd admired together just 2 nights ago. "What you told me on Saturday night, it wasn't just small talk. It was the missing piece of a puzzle I've been trying to solve for months." Months? I've suspected financial irregularities for a while, but I needed proof. Evidence. Details that only someone with access to the daily operations would know. He turned to face me, and his expression was completely serious. "Someone like you?" The full weight of what had happened hit me like a truck. "You didn't randomly get hired through that app, did you?" "No. I've been looking for a way to get close to the operations level of this company without alerting the people involved in the fraud. When I saw your booking request," he ran a hand through his hair, "it seemed like fate. So everything was fake. The whole night, the conversation, the dancing." My voice cracked. "You were just using me to get information." "Maya, no. That's not. I need to get back to work." I moved toward the door, humiliation burning through me like acid. "Unless you're firing me. Which would probably be easier for both of us." "I'm not firing you." His voice was quiet but firm. "But I do need your help. What you know, what you've documented, It could help us uncover a multi-million-dollar fraud that's been bleeding this company dry. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. What kind of help? The kind that could save Henderson and Associates. And the kind that could change your life forever. I looked back at him, this stranger who wasn't a stranger, this fake boyfriend who was turning out to be anything but fake. I looked back at him, this stranger who wasn't a stranger, this fake boyfriend who was turning out to be anything but fake. What exactly are you asking me to do? The coffee shop on 5th Street became our unofficial headquarters. It was far enough from the office that we wouldn't run into colleagues, but close enough that I could slip away during lunch breaks without raising suspicion. 3 weeks into our secret partnership, I'd memorized Daniel's order: black coffee, no sugar, and the same intensity in his eyes every time we met. The Meridian Solutions payment went through last Tuesday, I whispered, sliding a folder across the small table. But here's the interesting part: the approval signature doesn't match any of the authorized signatories on file. Daniel opened the folder, his fingers brushing mine briefly. Even now, even knowing who he really was, that small contact made my heart skip. Whose signature is it? That's what I can't figure out. It looks like Mr. Carter's, but the pen pressure is all wrong. And look at this. I pointed to a line on the document. The date stamped shows it was processed after hours, but the building logs show Mr. Carter left at 4:30 that day. Forged signatures. Daniel's jaw tightened the way it had at the gala. How many more like this? 17 that I've found so far. All for amounts between $50,000 and $500,000. Small enough to fly under the radar individually, but together. I pulled out my notebook, pages covered with calculations and cross-references. We're looking at over $8 million in the past year alone. Daniel stared at the numbers like they physically hurt him. $8 million stolen from a company that employs 300 people. People with families, mortgages, kids in college. The pain in his voice surprised me. I'd expected anger, maybe determination, but not this personal anguish. You really care about them. The employees. This company was my father's dream. He started it with nothing but a business degree and an unshakable belief that honest work should be rewarded. Daniel's voice grew quiet. He died believing that dream was in good hands. Something shifted in my chest. This wasn't just about money or fraud or corporate malfeasance. This was personal. This was about legacy and trust in everything Daniel's father had built being slowly torn apart by people who were supposed to protect it. We'll stop them, I said, surprised by the fierceness in my own voice. Our eyes met across the table, and for a moment, the coffee shop disappeared. It was just us, just this connection that had started with $20 and a desperate lie but had become something neither of us knew how to name. Maya, he started, then stopped, shaking his head. This is complicated. What's complicated? This. Us. The fact that I can't tell if you're helping me because you believe in what we're doing or because... He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. Because what? Because of what happened at the gala. The dancing, the conversation, the way you looked at me when I dropped you off. His voice was barely above a whisper. The way I looked at you. My breath caught. Daniel. I know it was supposed to be fake. I know you paid me to be there, to play a part. But somewhere between the balcony and that last dance, I forgot I was acting. The confession hung between us like a bridge neither of us was sure we should cross. 3 weeks of secret meetings, of carefully choreographed, accidental, encounters in the parking garage, of late-night text messages disguised as work communications. 3 weeks of pretending this was purely professional, while my heart raced every time his phone lit up my screen. We should focus on the investigation, I said finally, but my voice betrayed me. You're right. He closed the folder, but his eyes never left mine. Same time tomorrow? Same time tomorrow. But as I walked back to the office, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were both lying to ourselves. The next evening, Daniel was waiting in the parking garage when I finished work. This had become our new routine, accidentally running into each other, having brief conversations about weekend plans while passing encrypted flash drives disguised as casual touches. "Any luck with the Pacific Financial Advisory connection?" he asked, pretending to check his phone while I slipped him a USB drive containing account records I'd photographed after hours. "Better than luck. I found the smoking gun." I kept my voice casual, but my pulse was racing. "The company president is Linda Morrison." Daniel's head snapped up. "Your supervisor, Linda? The same Linda who told me to drop my questions about vendor payments. The same Linda who's been approving fake invoices and forging signatures for over a year." I smiled grimly. "She got sloppy. Used her personal email address on one of the incorporation documents." "Maya, this is incredible. This is exactly what we need to." "There's more. She's not working alone. I found email threads between her and someone called MC discussing payment schedules and project completion bonuses. Whoever MC is, they're the mastermind." Daniel was very still. "MC? Do you know who that could be?" Before he could answer, the parking garage elevator dinged, and Linda herself stepped out, her eyes scanning the area suspiciously. Daniel and I were standing too close, talking too intently. Even from 30 feet away, I could see recognition dawning on her face. "I have to go," I whispered urgently. "Maya, wait." But I was already walking toward my car, my heart pounding so hard I was sure Linda could hear it from across the garage. As I drove away, I caught sight of Daniel in my rearview mirror, still standing exactly where I'd left him, his expression unreadable. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, knowing that everything was about to change. We were close to exposing the truth, close to saving the company, close to finishing what we'd started. But I was also terrified that once the investigation was over, once the fraud was exposed and justice was served, Daniel would disappear from my life as suddenly as he'd entered it. After all, what did a company owner need with a secretary who'd already served her purpose? The emergency board meeting was called for Friday morning. I wasn't supposed to know about it, but Linda had been careless with her computer screen when she stepped away from her desk. The email from Mr. Henderson was brief. "Emergency session. Financial irregularities require immediate board action." My hands shook as I read it over her shoulder. They were going to move today, and I still hadn't figured out who MC was. "Maya." Daniel's voice made me jump. He was standing in the doorway of Linda's office, his expression grave. "Could I see you for a moment?" Linda looked up sharply, her eyes darting between us with barely concealed suspicion. "Mr. Castellanos, Maya has quite a bit of work to catch up on. It won't take long," Daniel said, and his tone left no room for argument. As we walked toward the conference room, I whispered urgently, "Daniel, they're having an emergency board meeting. Linda knows something's wrong. We need more time to figure out who." "We don't have more time." He stopped outside the conference room doors, taking both my hands in his. "Maya, I need you to trust me. What's about to happen in there? I need you to stay calm, no matter what you hear." "What do you mean?" "Daniel, you're scaring me. Just promise me. No matter what accusations get thrown around, no matter what anyone says, remember that you're the reason we still have a company to save." Before I could ask what he meant, he opened the doors to reveal not just the board of directors, but a room packed with senior staff, department heads, and 3 people I recognized as FBI agents from their unmistakable suits and serious expressions. My blood turned to ice. The FBI? This had gone way beyond corporate fraud. "Ladies and gentlemen," Daniel began, moving to the front of the room with the kind of authority that made everyone instantly silent. "Over the past month, we've uncovered a systematic embezzlement scheme that has stolen over $8 million from this company." Gasps echoed around the room. I caught sight of Jessica in the back, her face pale with shock. But it was Linda's reaction that made my stomach drop. She wasn't surprised. She was calculating, her eyes scanning the room like she was looking for escape routes. The scheme involved creating fake vendor companies, forging approval signatures, and routing payments to offshore accounts. Daniel continued, pulling up a presentation screen. Pacific Financial Advisory, Meridian Solutions, Summit Strategic Group, all shell companies designed to bleed this organization dry. One by one, he displayed the evidence I'd helped him gather. Bank records, forged documents, email communications. The room grew quieter with each revelation, the weight of betrayal settling over everyone like a heavy blanket. The mastermind of this operation has been Linda Morrison, your payroll supervisor, working in conjunction with... Daniel paused, his eyes finding mine across the room. Martin Carter, head of accounting. Martin Carter, MC. The mild-mannered accountant who'd cancelled our meetings, who told me the information was above my clearance level, who'd seemed so nervous whenever I asked questions about vendor payments. That's impossible, Mr. Henderson sputtered. Martin's been with us for 15 years. He's one of our most trusted employees who had access to signature stamps, approval codes, and banking information. One of the FBI agents interrupted, stepping forward. Mr. Carter was arrested this morning at his home. We recovered over $2 million in cash and evidence of offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The room erupted in shocked murmurs, but I was watching Linda. Her face had gone chalk white, and her hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were bloodless. Linda Morrison, the FBI agent continued. You're under arrest for conspiracy, embezzlement, and wire fraud. Wait. Linda shot to her feet, her composure finally cracking. You can't prove anything. Those documents could have been planted, those signatures could have been forged by anyone with access to the signature stamps in your desk? Daniel pulled out a plastic evidence bag containing the very stamp I'd seen Linda use dozens of times. The one with your fingerprints all over it? The one used to approve fake invoices worth millions of dollars? Linda's eyes darted around the room desperately before landing on me. This is her fault, she screamed, pointing a shaking finger in my direction. Maya Thompson. She's been feeding information to Castellanos, stealing documents, violating confidentiality agreements. If anyone should be arrested. Maya Thompson. Daniel's voice cut through her hysteria like a blade. Is the reason we caught you. Every eye in the room turned to me. I felt exposed, terrified, but Daniel's steady gaze gave me strength. She noticed the irregularities you thought no one would see. She documented the discrepancies you thought were too small to matter. She risked her job to gather evidence when you threatened her to stay quiet. Daniel's voice grew stronger with each word. And she did it because she cares about this company and the people who work here. As the FBI agents led Linda away in handcuffs, her bitter accusations still echoing in the room, Daniel walked over to where I stood frozen by the revelation of it all. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced to the stunned room. Effective immediately, Maya Thompson is promoted to Chief Financial Officer. She's earned the right to oversee the financial integrity she helped restore. The room buzzed with surprised murmurs, but all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat as Daniel smiled at me with something that looked remarkably like pride. And maybe, just maybe, something more. 3 months later, I stood in front of the same building where everything had changed, but this time I wasn't the invisible secretary sneaking in through the side entrance. The brass nameplate on my office door read, Maya Thompson, Chief Financial Officer. And somehow, I still couldn't quite believe it was real. The investigation had made national news. Secretary exposes multi-million-dollar corporate fraud, had been the headline that launched 1,000 interviews I'd politely declined. The story was compelling enough without my face attached to it. The overlooked employee who'd saved her company, the rental boyfriend who turned out to be a billionaire, the fake relationship that had exposed very real corruption. But tonight, as I watched the sun set over the city from my corner office, none of that mattered. What mattered was the soft knock on my door and the man who entered carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the same smile that had first caught my attention at a charity gala that felt like a lifetime ago. Working late again? Daniel asked, setting a cup on my desk. Black coffee, 1 sugar, exactly how I liked it. He'd memorized my preferences the same way I'd memorized his. The quarterly reports won't review themselves, I said, but I was already closing my laptop. Besides, someone has to make sure we're not paying any mysterious consulting companies for non-existent services. I think we're safe on that front. Daniel settled into the chair across from my desk, the same chair where nervous employees used to sit when they needed to explain budget overruns or request expense approvals. Now it was just where Daniel sat when he wanted to talk, when he needed my opinion on company direction, when he wanted to remind me that despite all the changes, some things had stayed wonderfully the same. "How was the board meeting?" I asked. "Productive. We're officially in the black for the first time in 2 years, thanks to recovering most of the stolen funds and implementing your new oversight protocols." He paused, studying my face. "They want to throw you a celebration dinner. Something fancy with speeches and awards." I wrinkled my nose. "Please tell me you said no." "I told them I'd ask, but I had a feeling you'd prefer something quieter." His eyes held that familiar warmth that made my heart skip even now, even after 3 months of daily conversations and shared coffee breaks and the kind of partnership that had nothing to do with fake relationships and everything to do with real respect. "You know me too well." "Do I?" The question was softer than his usual tone, and it made me look up from my coffee cup to find him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Daniel?" He stood up, moving to the window that overlooked the city lights. "Maya, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." My pulse quickened. "Okay. If none of this had happened, if there had been no fraud to investigate, no company to save, no promotion to celebrate, would you still want to see me?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with 3 months of careful professionalism and buried feelings and the kind of tension that came from two people pretending they were just business partners when everyone in the building could see they were something more. "Are you asking me out, Mr. Castellanos?" I said, trying to keep my voice light even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "I'm asking if Maya Thompson, Chief Financial Officer, would be interested in having dinner with Daniel Castellanos, not as her business partner, not as her employer, but as the man who's been completely crazy about her since she paid him $20 to pretend to be her boyfriend." I set down my coffee cup and walked over to where he stood, close enough to see the uncertainty in his eyes, close enough to remember what it felt like to dance with him in a ballroom full of people who thought they knew exactly who we were. "You know," I said, reaching up to straighten his tie the way I'd wanted to do every day for the past 3 months. "I think I should get my money back." His eyebrows rose. $20? That seems reasonable for $20 for a fake boyfriend who turned out to be real. $20 for a 4-hour rental that lasted 3 months. $20 for a pretend relationship that saved my career and changed my entire life. I smiled up at him, finally letting myself feel everything I'd been holding back. "That's terrible value for money." Daniel's smile was brilliant, transforming his face the same way it had that first night when I'd opened my apartment door and found my life standing on the doorstep. "So what would you consider fair compensation?" he asked, his hands finding my waist, pulling me closer. "Dinner," I said. "A real dinner, with a real relationship, with a real future that doesn't involve offshore accounts or FBI investigations or any more fake anything." "I can manage that," he said, and then he was kissing me, and it was nothing like the polite peck on the cheek he'd given me that first night. This was real and warm and full of 3 months of stolen glances and careful professionalism, and feelings neither of us had been brave enough to name. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless and dizzy and completely, utterly happy. "So," I said, my arms still wrapped around his neck, "guess I can't afford you as my fake boyfriend anymore." Daniel laughed, the sound echoing through my corner office, through the building where we'd found each other, through the life I never could have imagined when I desperately clicked "book now" on a dating app 3 months ago. "Good," he said, his forehead resting against mine. "Because I'd rather be the real one." And as we stood there in my office, in our building, in the life we'd built from $20 and a desperate lie, I realized that sometimes the best investments were the ones you never saw coming. The end.